Okay, we all know by now that Russia has kidnapped thousands of Ukrainian children, shipped them to Russia, and is attempting to assimilate them, to Russify them. That this is a classic tactic. The American government used it against our own indigenous people, where we abducted kids and put them in residential schools. Canada did the same. Canada also kidnapped those children and placed them with families. Denmark did the same thing to kids from Greenland in the 1950s, and I believe this has also happened to Sami children in Scandinavia as well. This is a classic tactic that cultural genociders use. So I posted a video a little bit ago about the latest reporting about how America was tracking these children in Russia in an attempt to find them and reunite them with their families, and how Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, Elon Musk's little lapdog, whose last name is Morocco, they canceled that program. And now suddenly the files, including the surveillance data about where these children are, is missing. And we may have effectively lost tens of thousands of Ukrainian children into the Russian landscape. So I posted that video to YouTube, and it had Russia in the title. It mentioned Ukraine. And I have never had so many Russian bot comments on a video. It has been unbelievable. I have been blocking as quickly as I can, but it's interesting to me to see now that this regime has lifted so many of the cybersecurity protections, lifted so many of all of the protections for Americans against Russian cyber attacks, bots, etc., that they are just like free roaming. I mean, they were free roaming America's internet before, but they are just everywhere. But I wanted to point out one specific type of comment I'm getting over and over, and it's a really interesting and like maybe kind of creative bot comment. A really creative tactic that these folks are using every time somebody brings up the atrocities that Russia is committing against Ukraine. These are war crimes, and if you think they're not, go ahead and talk to the ICC because they say that they are. But I kept getting different versions of the same argument put forth in the comments of that video that I made. And they were all a really hefty dose of whataboutism, all along the same lines, attempting to distract from the horrors that Russia, in their war of aggression against Ukraine, is committing against Ukrainian civilians, especially children, and the ways that America is complicit in that now. We weren't just a few months ago, but we are now. I was getting this pattern of comments that initially looked like very pro-Palestine, very much appealing to folks on the left, including myself, because I've been very outspoken against what is happening in Gaza and the ways that our elected representatives with the hefty support of AIPAC have been funding it. So let me read a couple of these because I think this is pretty savvy propaganda here, especially when we are looking at a media ecosystem, when a corner of leftist social media, especially on TikTok, is already very sympathetic to Russia. There can be this tendency to conflate an infatuation with the USSR with sympathy for today's Russia under Putin. And also, Russia's worked really hard to have anti-Ukraine propaganda. I'm sure I'm not the only one who has seen it since well before this election. Anyway, this comment, odd choice of story to use, as Israel just killed hundreds of children in plain sight for all to see. 50% using the average of the 500 plus in the past week in Gaza. CBS used to air Raytheon ads in 2022-2023. You're getting fed war propaganda, Parkrose Permaculture. Right? Like, I don't disagree that anything that Netanyahu, with the support of Trump, is doing in Gaza is reprehensible. And those are, human rights violations. Those are war crimes. I have no disagreement with that. But that last line. Okay, this is another one. Feel free and pause to read this. I am not going to read this entire treatise, this manifesto that someone left in my comments. There's the tail end where they try and say that Russia is not the enemy of democracy. It's really Israel. Again, this weird dichotomy, this weird whataboutism, an attempt to distract from a conversation about what Russia is doing in Ukraine by bringing up Israel. I said this is a really weird false dichotomy, some serious whataboutism. Like I just said, it actually reads like pro-Russian propaganda in the guise of anti-Israel propaganda. Was that your intent? Honestly, I think this is some very clever pro-Russian propaganda cloaked in pro-Pally speak. We can be outraged about every horrific war criminal and the crimes he is committing against children. Again, more comments up here about how I shouldn't be focusing on what Russia is doing and the plight of Ukrainian children. I should focus on Gaza. And then, of course, completely overt disinformation from Russian bot accounts, claiming these children were never Ukrainian, they're not being abducted, they're being returned to their homeland or some shit like that. And then also more disinformation trying to make Ukraine look like the aggressor here when they're absolutely not. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out, that is happening in my comments. And, I had to delete and block probably close to 24 accounts And that's a lot for me. At the time, it was almost 10% of the comments on that video. We all need a really hefty dose of skepticism about what people are saying in the comments, especially if they have anonymous accounts, and especially if they are in any way trying to blame Ukraine, trying to distract from the issue, and slip in pro-Russia disinformation about Ukraine and about what Russia's role is in the human rights violations and accused war crimes that they are committing. It was bad before the election, but now with Pam Bondi and everybody else repealing any kind of protections for Americans, it is open season for Russian bots and, provocateurs to be in our comments, spreading disinformation and misinformation, not to mention the amount of it we are getting straight from the White House.